first one specifically is quite interesting to me, so hopefully it'll be palatable, not too complicated. This book has been usually published with a list of names of everyone involved in everything, and it's a long list, and you're gonna have trouble keeping track of those people. But conveniently, if you scroll to the end of the book, so they talked about it in the introduction. We'll read it, but like they didn't include the normal list of names because, and they also changed something from previous editions of this book that I like. They used to use Wade Giles transliterations for the names, which are horrible, really annoying. They changed them. They changed the names to Pinyin. I'm so happy. It's going to be so much easier to read. So at the end of the book, they have a new appendix that they've added here. That is the list of names reference list here. But it's not in Wade Giles anymore, and it has some extra explanations. I don't know what the original list of names looks like, but this is a new one that they've made to accompany the book. If you're having trouble keeping track of all the people, you might want to take this names reference list and like print it out. I haven't done that. We'll see if I need to do it. Like print it out separately. And just have it, you know. That's what they recommend, I think. in the introduction, print this out separately. That's what they say, actually. Because there's a lot of people who you're gonna need to get to know during this book. Some of them are very well known already. People like Chunboda. We have people like got Guanfeng here. We've got who else? I saw some other Lin Biao. We've got Li Shaoqi on here. We've got a lot of well-known people, but then there's also a lot of not well-known people, so mostly not well-known, probably, like people from the university. Anyway, so yeah, that's what this book is, and let's go ahead and get into the introduction here, shall we? So we can, they're going to talk about this publication and stuff. If we take a look at the contents actually real quickly. So we've got like 3 parts. Part 1, a regular education. Part 2, it is right to rebel. Correct. Part 3, the working class intervenes. So there's the outline. It's a very short outline of the book. All right. All right. So, introductory note. This is not a definitive history of the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution at Tsinghua University. It must be considered rather a compilation of some rough notes taken from conversations with a few participants. Which is funny because a lot of the reviews are criticizing just how it goes too in-depth, but they're saying that it doesn't go in-depth enough. No, we wanted it to be more detailed, actually. Oh boy. Anyway, others who lived through the same events will surely find important omissions and distortions. The full story can only be told when Tsinghua people themselves get together and recreate it from the thousands of sources that now exist, but may soon be dispersed beyond recall. Much of the story is recorded in collections of posters, leaflets, telegrams, and letters. Much more still resides only in the heads of people who took part. A concerted effort to collect and preserve this material on the part of the cadres, teachers, and students at Tsinghua would be invaluable. Whether it will ever be made is another question. Already important documents have been lost, key people have departed for distant provinces, while those who remain and could do the job are so busy reconstructing their institution that they tend to slight its history. There is also a political problem, a problem of consensus. The ideological struggle has been very sharp. Furthermore, it is still going on. Who can be trusted to sum up what happened? Who can interpret its real meaning? A dogmatic sectarian spirit associated with the influence of Lin Biao still colors some people's thinking. What actually happened tends to get mixed up with what should have happened, and so strong is the stigma attached to those who have ended up in disgrace that the purists want to leave them out of the story altogether, apparently on the grounds that to tell about their mistaken acts and ideas is equivalent somehow to advocating the same. Oh, hi, Tumblr. Oh my god, you depicted something bad happening in fiction? How dare you? Or in this case, talking about something bad happening in history. That means you're advocating for it. This book features people with wrong opinions. You're platforming their ideas by talking about them, platforming them. Fuck. Sorry. I gotta stretch my arms are sore from yesterday's workout. Anyway, for the majority who reject this kind of dogmatism, there is still the problem of prematurely judging political trends that are unclear. In the summer of the 1971 Kuai Dafu, the nationally famous Tsinghua student leader was under investigation as a May 16th conspirator, which was a let's talk about this. So they're going to explain what they made by that. May 16th was the name adopted by in 1967 by a group of conspirators against Mao Zedong's leadership who attacked from the left in the classical tradition of Leon Trotsky and his followers. They chose May 16th because this was the date of the first important inter-party circular written by Mao in 1966. It spelled out the issues of the Cultural Revolution. Typically, the anti-Maoist conspirators chose to wrap themselves in a mantle of legitimacy by aligning, in name at least, with this important document. Okay. So this guy was under investigation as a supposed conspirator with this. Okay. Since his case had not been settled, our informants first tried to tell their story without mentioning Kuai at all. As our questions went deeper, this became impossible, and Kuai emerged almost larger than life as an anti-hero. At that very time, the whole campus population was rallying to expose him, and the verdict seemed inevitable. Then came the Lin Biao affair, and with it the possibility that the verdict on Kuai might eventually be modified. I do not mean to suggest here that there is any serious dispute about the facts, about what happened, about what Kuai actually did, but that there is room for doubt as to what it all means politically. As of this writing, the fall of Lin Biao has not been explained, at least not to the world at large. I have as yet no way of telling how much of what we heard in the summer of 1971 may have been colored by apologists for Lin Biao and his line at a time when the defense minister and Mao's designated successor as chairman of the Chinese Communist Party was on the verge of exposure and presumably, therefore, battling for his political life on many levels. That's funny, he calls it the CCP. So, despite what many people will tell you, while it is correct that the actual official English name of the party is the Communist Party of China, not the Chinese Communist Party, the Communist Party of China routinely has translated its own name as Chinese Communist Party in the past. This isn't a sign that this guy hates Chinese communists. Just to be clear, the author of this book very much likes Chinese communists. It's just that as much as people want to read into different translation conventions for the name, it's mostly bullshit. While it is true that I personally do refer to them as the Communist Party of China because that's what they're actually called. But when people say Chinese Communist Party, you know what they mean, even if it's slightly wrong. It's kind of like how if somebody says South Korea instead of the Republic of Korea, or they say Taiwan instead of the Republic of China. We know what they mean. It's not the correct official name for those places right now, but we know what they mean. Well, actually, Taiwan is the name of the island, so it is correct. But it's just the name of the one island. The Republic of China controls more than just the island of Taiwan at the moment. But anyway, my point is, we know what they mean. So, why then tell this story now at all? Well, what did you say? Oh yeah, Mao's designated successor as chairman of the Chinese Communist Party was on the verge of exposure and presumably therefore battling for his political life on many levels. Why then tell this story now at all? Well, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Oh boy. Yeah. Sure are a lot of fools. I feel that the story, partial and biased as it may be, still contains important lessons. For one thing, the history of the Cultural Revolution at Tsinghua helps explain what the old revisionist education was really like, and why people rose up en masse against it. For another, it shows how this education, the educators themselves, and their students were transformed, or at least how this transformation began. For American readers who have been led to doubt that any real issues existed, or that anything really changed after all was said and done, this should prove useful. Oh boy. Far more important is the story of how right and so-called left political lines, left in scare quotes, developed in the mass movement, and in particular how an ultra-left line emerged, dominated the field for a time, and then was defeated. From beginning to end, the soundness and vitality of Mao Zedong's approach to the socialist revolution stands out. As William says, like I said, William is a big fan of Chinese communists. He's just specifically a big fan of Mao, especially, as you can tell immediately. Of course, he also acknowledges that that is quite a bias right away here in the book, so that's good to see. Also, welcome to the stream, ATS. But as far as William's writings go, they tend to be quite praised regardless of his own political bias, so we'll see how this goes. I wish I could read Funshot on stream, but God, it is so long. It is so fucking long. It would take like a year to read so much. I had to do more streams and stream for longer if I wanted to finish it in a reasonable amount of time. Anyway. So, by reviewing these events, one can begin to understand the crucial role which Mao played in mobilizing the mass movement when this was the key to the future, and then in guiding it through one crisis after another as right and so-called left deviations threatened to destroy it. This could be a revelation for those who think that seizing power is the ultimate act of revolution. So I actually have to agree with him on a lot of what he says about Mao, though. As an anarchist, obviously I have major disagreements with Mao and Marxist-Leninists in general, but as far as what he's talking about here, with regards to like Mao's role in the Cultural Revolution, he's pretty much correct. Like, it was 100% a crucial role. And one thing that I have a minor nitpick on was he writes this sentence, or this, mobilizing the mass movement when this was the key to the future, and then in guiding it through one crisis after another. So I know what he's getting at here, but I have to nitpick, because really? You see the result, right? You see the result here. Can you really say that he mobilized the mass movement when it was the key time to do that? Because I think that it was too late. I think that it was far too late. But that's just me, anarchist talking, I guess. So maybe Bill would disagree. Anyway. This can be a revelation for those who think that seizing power is the ultimate act of revolution. So what is he really arguing with that? Is he saying... it's possible that he's digging more at... I guess you could call them, I hate this term, but orthodox Marxist-Leninists. What a ridiculous term. But anyway, at like, you know, seize the state and then that's it, or whatever. You know, that's the revolution. I think he might be digging at that, but he's also talking about Mao guiding the mass movement. And so Mao and Maoists especially talk a lot about how the vanguard should interact with the masses, and generally it's the opinion is that they should basically be the masses, right? And there shouldn't be such a separation, so to speak. And just that the only distinction for many Maoists between the masses and the vanguard is that the vanguard are the most, quote, politically advanced segment, the ones who take up, you know, the role of, rather than telling people what to do, instead going around talking to people, asking them all sorts of questions. What's going on? You know, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? Trying to figure out, you know, what the problems are, and then going and meeting and talking about that, asking people what they think the solutions are, blah, 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 you know, and then trying to synthesize from that a line that would be, well, in line with what the masses tend to want, and what would actually, you know, work. And then you carry that out. You don't just... And it's also, you're going to tell people about it, but it's less about forcing people to do something and more about educating people on various things, at most, right? Guiding is a good word there, I think, rather than controlling, if that makes any sense, right? That's kind of the ideal, right? And he thinks that Mao did that well. I don't think that Mao did that very well. I think that the idea is very similar to what a lot of anarchists actually think, in terms of like what the role of, well, more politically advanced folks, if you want to use that term, is in the revolution. And it's like, well, yeah, we obviously, as anarchists, we're not trying to control everything. You know, at most, we want to guide people into being able to seize power for themselves, away from state power. So anyway, and whatnot. So in theory, there's a lot of overlap, and this is why a lot of Maoists get slandered as anarchists, you know, by like non-Maoist Marxist-Leninists all the time. There is some theoretical overlap, actually, between anarchism and Maoism. But it should be noted that they are actually distinct, by a fair margin. Just a little overlap there. And that gets them. They also get slandered as Trotskyists sometimes. Anyway. So, yeah, I don't know. This little jab, those that think seizing power is the ultimate act of revolution. It's like seizing power, like if I think this is more pointed at the theoretical vanguard, if you want to call it that, right? Like the most advanced, the most politically advanced folks around. The people on the, you know, sort of on the front lines of trying to have the revolution, often think that they need to seize the power. That's the one thing that they have to do. But then they completely neglect, like, everyone else, right? I think that's what he's saying. Rather, he's saying, at most, they should be guiding people, if you will, rather than just acting on their own without any regard for the masses, in their terms, I guess. Anyway, I feel that the question of ultra-left thought and action, so central to the history of Xinhua, is especially important for young Americans to ponder. On the one hand, there are voices in the West still insisting that the ultra-left represented the real revolution in China, and that, in the end, Mao Zedong, in spite of many beautiful words, crushed the flower of Chinese youth. I wouldn't say that. On the other hand, many American revolutionaries are as prone as their Chinese counterparts to accept ultra-left slogans and policies. People find it hard to identify counter-revolution when it comes in left clothing. This is true. This is very, very true. They think, anyway, left is better than right. They just hear somebody say that we're more left, and they're like, oh yeah, they're more left. Just completely uncritically accept it. Remember, the sort of definition given by Mao of the ultra-leftism, right? Or ultra-leftists, that term originally means something like those who hold up the red flag to oppose the red flag. People who say, I'm more left than you, I'm more radical than you, therefore you're a counter-revolutionary, and I'm the real revolutionary, fuck you, you know. So like, and this is usually done whenever anybody is trying to do something actually useful. You'll always have somebody coming from the left, calling them counter-revolutionary. The left, except they're actually just trying to stop the actual progress that's happening. That's what he's referring to. It's not the same as like somebody who isn't actually doing something useful, you know, like actual rightists trying to make things worse. People from the actual, you know, left criticizing them because they're trying to make things worse. Sometimes the rightists will call them derogatorily, you know, ultra-leftists, and try to say that that's what they're doing. You're stopping progress. But actually, they're wrong. They're actually just trying to make things worse for once, right? It's like, so sometimes this term ultra-left gets used in ways that it gets overused. Let's just put it that way. It gets used by actual rightists, which is not how it was originally used, but of course it's quite easy to appropriate by actual rightists, isn't it? But anyway, people find it hard to identify counter-revolution when it comes in so-called left clothing. They think, anyway, left is better than right. Having learned to hate imperialism, they tend to assume that he who speaks most sharply and advocates the most extreme action hates imperialism the most. Like that, strap me to a missile and fire me at Tel Aviv guy. Yeah. He's advocating the most extreme action. Must be the most revolutionary. To be fair, okay, there's not really never mind. Well, okay, I was gonna say something about how that speech is only famous because it got onto Memory TV, and well, we don't need to talk about Memory TV. But let's just say when they translate things on there, they aren't being completely impartial with how they interpret some things. Anyway, they try to pick out the most absurd things that people say, is all I'm saying, and they'll translate things to sound more absurd on purpose sometimes just to get more views. That's what Memory TV does, in case you're wondering. The goal of Memory TV, a lot of it at least, is to kind of like make you think that like most of like the people that they're featuring are like absolutely wacko. Okay, it's kind of sensationalist generally. It gets them more views. Okay. if the only media you ever watched about that like featured I guess the word would be Arabs mostly, right, was Memory TV, you would probably end up being really racist, that's all I'm gonna say. Anyway, you would not have the greatest impression of Arabs, I guess. So let's see here. If revolutionary politics were that simple, no one would need to study Marx, Lenin, or Mao. The reddest flag is the most revolutionary. Oh my. So, do you think this really follows? Why is this specifically Marx, Lenin, or Mao? Because he's a Marxist, Leninist. Mao is saying this, right? There are other people who would say similar things, but they would name other people, or they would name particular books or theories. Right, my flag is redder than yours. My red card got printed with slightly darker red ink than yours did, I bet. Oh yeah, look at that. Look how beautifully red mine is. God. Yours is slightly lighter red. Ugh. Are you even real? Are you even a real revolutionary? Oh my fucking god. Alright, let's see here. So, ultra-left politics are disastrous because they isolate the working class and make it impossible for working class leaders to unite all forces that can be united against the main enemy. Yeah, this is very common. He's kind of getting to the real point, right? Is that it's like, you have somebody who thinks they know better, right? We're more revolutionary, we're more radical, and so then all they ever do is criticize, like, the regular old people in, like, the labor movement, you know? Anything they do, because it's not revolutionary, which, to be fair, it often isn't revolutionary. It's often only economic, rather than social things that they're pushing for, like a new contract with better wages or something, It's very common, that's true. But that doesn't mean that those things are bad or counter-revolutionary, right? Just because they're not also trying to negotiate a change over to a co-op structure or whatever, does not mean that they're counter-revolutionary. Anyway, a common element disrupting unity here is, as it so often has in China, is I am the core thinking, which maintains that I and my group are the real revolutionaries, while people with other ideas, or people who have come to the same ideas at a later date, really don't deserve consideration as comrades, and certainly cannot be in the vanguard. Well, I came up with that idea last year. You can't be in my vanguard party because you didn't come up with it until 5 months ago. You're so behind, y'all. Anyway, the Tsinghua story clearly shows how damaging I in the core thinking can be, how it leads to arrogance, isolation, and finally to crimes against the people, all dressed in the most noble left rhetoric. If this can be understood, these rough notes will justify themselves. Right, it's the eternal problem of the self-proclaimed vanguards. In a sharp contrast to I am the core thinking stands the united action of the Beijing workers, who ignored the most extreme provocations to bring hopelessly warring student factions together. What united the workers and eventually reunited the students was, oh boy, here we go, interesting phrase he's about to pull out, Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought. Quite an interesting phrase, because that doesn't mean the same as Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. No, it doesn't. Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought is very different, isn't it? They mean different things. Rarely has a more convincing demonstration of the power of the revolutionary theory this revolutionary theory been demonstrated.
then on the Tsinghua campus on July 27th, 1968.
What he's saying, though, I just want to point out what he's saying here when he says that is he's kind of implying that Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought is sort of against this I'm the real vanguardism thing, and is very pro letting the workers organize themselves, basically, to do things, which is an interesting way to define Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, considering how that phrase tends to be used these days most often, is not that, right? Anyway, if the extraordinary nature of these events and the political consciousness that made them possible can be understood in some measure from these notes, that will too justify their publication. In the rapid editing which this book received in the spring of 1972, which was 51 years ago. I'm so old. When it was being rushed for publication as the summer issue of Monthly Review, it proved impossible to check the transliterations from the Chinese according to a uniform system. For this reason, the text contains transliterations that are not consistent with the overall system used. The following is a list of spellings as they appear in the text and as they should more properly have been spelled. And they're just going to skip that. So this is the note, the list of names that I was mentioning at the beginning of the stream. So if you want the list of names, go to the end of the book, go to the appendix. There's the list of names there, but it's a different list of names than what was originally included here. They've omitted it. Here we go. This is the Foreign Languages Press editor's note. Foreign Languages Press has omitted the previously mentioned list because we have, with the previous publisher's permission, chosen instead to transcribe all the Chinese names and words from the antiquated Wade-Giles system to the modern pinyin one. Thank God. Indeed, with all the complicated and non-intuitive apostrophes and hyphens in the Wade-Giles system, some mistakes were made and some names were spelled slightly differently in different chapters. Keeping track of the long list of Chinese names for non-Chinese readers is already difficult. Over the years, that has been one of the most consistent comments about this book. And it was when I read the reviews on Goodreads of this book. A lot of people were complaining about how many people there are to keep track of. To mitigate this confusion, in addition to correcting some inconsistencies in the text, we created a names reference list as an appendix, and printed it as a separate leaflet so that the readers can refer to it easily while reading. So if you were to buy this book from them, like in print form, you would get the book and you would also get the appendix, the names list, as a separate thing, is what they're saying. But remember, the PDF is free. You can just print out the names list yourself if you want to and follow along. I might have to do that. We'll see. Once we get into it, maybe by next stream I'll have printed out the names list in case it's if this turns out to be a bit difficult. This list is not exhaustive. It is limited to people who are mentioned at different times in the text, in order to help remind readers who they are and how they were referred in earlier instances. The descriptions are taken from the time the events occurred and largely from Hinton's own words. In addition, we created a brief roadmap of the main Red Guard factions in Beijing and at Tsinghua University with their leaders and alliances. These lists, along with the author's original footnotes, should be read and taken in the context of the time that this book was written, in 1971, when, as the author states, many political events had not yet been summed up with the benefit of time and hindsight. Other changes to the original text are limited to minor changes in punctuation, which we believe to enhance readability. We hope that these additions and changes will make this important text more accessible. I hope so too. So here we have a sketch of the Tsinghua main campus, and it's sideways, so there we go. No, it's not sideways. Look at that. So there were 4 battles, and they're not kidding when they say battles. Like, they had like guns and tanks and shit. Actual battles between different factions of students at the university, okay? Just to be clear. So there were 4 battles. April 23rd, April 29th, May 2nd, and May 30th, marked with A, B, C, and D on the map. Here's A, okay? Here's B, happened over here by the dormitories. Okay. C happened over here next to the civil engineering building. And finally, Battle D on May 30th is somewhere over here by the bathhouse, and in between the bathhouse and the old dining hall. All right. So this is the map of the university's main campus. This is a river. Okay. This is a river. There's a tunnel here as well. There's a couple of tunnels. Keep in mind, the tunnels are these dashed lines here. Okay. Let me just zoom in a little bit. You can see the tunnels. These are the tunnels. Okay. So this is another thing that you might want to print out and keep ready, because we're probably going to be talking about all of these different buildings, and it would be helpful to know where they are when we're talking about all this shit. Yeah, okay. And there's also a key here. So different buildings are held by different factions. The striped ones are held by the regiment, and the fours apparently held the non-striped buildings. Okay. So let's fix that back up. All right. So here we go. Part 1. We start with a quotation from Mao on one of his earlier works. Well, not that early, actually. It's 1957. It's not that early. From his little essay or whatever on the correct handling of contradictions among the people. So what does he say? The class struggle is by no means over, right? So this is sort of post, they've kicked out the Kuomintang and everything is, so a lot of people would say, oh, you've seized the power, that's the end of the revolution, which is of course ridiculous. Any anarchist would say that's wrong, and Maoists would say that's wrong as well, including Mao himself. He's not a Maoist, he's just Mao. The class struggle is by no means over. The class struggle between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, the class struggle between the different political forces, and the class struggle in the ideological field between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie will continue to be long and torturous, and at times will even become very acute. The proletariat seeks to transform the world according to its own world outlook, and so does the bourgeoisie. In this respect, the question of which will win out, socialism or capitalism, is still not really settled. Many people would say, oh, it's settled because you seized the state. It's not settled once you seize the state, right? Class struggle hasn't ended there. The revolution hasn't ended. The revolution has only just begun, in at least his theory, right? Seizing the state isn't the revolution. Usually the end of the revolution would be marked by ending of the state. Whether you believe demolishing it relatively quickly or letting it wither away after seizing it and slowly replacing it with institutions that are not state institutions, whether you believe in one theory or the other, generally the goal is to get rid of the state. Anyway. And during that time, while the state still exists, if that's the theory you subscribe to, there will be still class contradictions and other social issues that need to be addressed during that time. You haven't magically fixed everything just because you see a state power. Anyway. Chapter 1. July on the campus. Tsinghua University, China's most famous school of science and engineering, lies at the northern end of the university district of Beijing, not far from the point where the North China Plain, stretching unbroken from the Yellow Sea, meets the western hills. The rock-ribbed ridges that rise abruptly into the sky in a great arc around the Chinese capital. This is true. That is indeed how how the land goes around there. I suppose we could take a look at what he's talking about. Like, for those unfamiliar with the region somehow, you've never heard of China before, I don't know. So for those unfamiliar with Chinese geography, okay, so Beijing is up here, and you'll notice there's ocean here. Notice the difference in the colors. You see this big line here? This is the edge of the mountains, and this is all the plain here, right? It's all flat here, and then we have the Yellow Sea. Okay, so Beijing is up here, and as you can see, it's right next to the mountains, and then the other side of it is the plain, and then way over there is the sea. So yeah, it's we're talking about the university area, which back then, oh boy, this was 50 years ago, 51 years ago. So I don't know if this airport existed back then. I don't think it did. Just gonna put that out there. Where exactly is he saying? Just northern edge of the university district, not far from the point. So the thing is that it could be over here, or it could be sort of up here. I think it might be more over here. Not entirely sure, but I don't know about the layout of this university or where it currently, like, you can see some things over here that look vaguely school-esque. There's a lot of so this one is this is where we are. Yeah, this is the university that we're talking about. Okay, I guessed correctly. This is Tsinghua University, and so there's a river somewhere, as we saw on the map, but it of course looks very different now than it did back then, doesn't it? Right? But anyway, this is the university now. In case you're wondering, it still exists. They didn't blow it up. All right. Anyway, this capital occupies one of the finest sites for a city anywhere in the world. It's got mountains. Hell yeah, I love mountains. Boy, just as on a neighborhood scale, one would build a house in a hollow encircled by hills and thus ensure both beauty and shelter, so on a continental scale, the builders of Beijing laid out their city on the vast flat in the elbow formed by the Taihang and the Yan mountains, and thus combined panoramic splendor with some moderation of the cold steppe winds that blow almost all year out of Mongolia and Central Asia. Spacious as was the grand design conceived by these ancient architects, they still left plenty of room for expansion on all four sides. The spacious design was mostly for mitigation of fires, by the way. It was very common also in Japan. Like, if you've seen the map of ancient Kyoto, for example, you've seen that it's separated into very spaced out blocks, right? So if one block sets on fire, the fire is much less likely to spread to another block. Anyway, so there's a lot of that kind of thing going on in the consideration of the architecture there and the layout of the city. But also it's the capital, so making things spacious and big, sounds just about right anyway. Since 1949, this rural space has been filling up with astonishing speed. Most of modern Beijing's bustling, roaring, smoking new industry has been built to the east, south, and west of the city, leaving the north to the schools, new and old, and the parks, palaces, and imperial ruins that have long dominated there. Whether there have always been more trees in this suburb, whether more trees have been planted here in the last 20 years, or whether trees just naturally do better at the foot of the mountains, I do not know. But certainly on coming to this area, one is impressed by the great density and variety of the foliage and by the long reach of the cool shade it casts on streets, lanes, rice paddies, wheat fields, residential buildings, campus yards, and classroom buildings alike. In the summer of 1971, Tsinghua's 200-acre campus, lying hot and humid under the July sun, seemed to us especially verdant and leafy, at least in the older western section, and the crops, corn, beans, cucumbers, and melons growing on much of the land between buildings spread greenness to the earth underfoot. The luxuriant growth above and below combined to give the whole area an unkempt look that was reinforced by slack maintenance of the lawns, the athletic fields, and numerous outlying buildings. Bushes and shrubs planted by an earlier generation of landscapers had not been trimmed for years. Scattered rocks and bricks still lay where they had fallen or been thrown during the hostilities of 1968. Old engineering equipment and sports paraphernalia, such as the uprooted steel frames of basketball backboards, lay in piles behind the weathered field house. Broken panes gaped from windows whose wooden frames warped, cracked, and peeled pre-revolutionary paint. In the campus creek, black water laced with detergent foam flowed sluggishly. Oh boy. Oh, should I... For those who have never lived in an area where this happens, let me see if I can find a picture of what they're talking about with the creek, with the foam on the creek, because I've seen a recent example of that in India, actually. There are It looks almost like snow, right? Here's an example. That's possibly similar to what he's talking about, though I don't know if it was quite as extreme as this. Anyway, so factories just like dump shit into the river, you know. Anyway, all this lent to Tsinghua an air of sleepy neglect that seemed quite out of tune with the whole spirit of revolutionary Beijing, and with that energetic thrust of construction, production, and innovation which the Cultural Revolution had unleashed. The explanation lay perhaps in the fact that the campus was only slowly reviving from the long political struggle which, at its height, saw machine guns, rifles, Molotov cocktails, and homemade cannons used by contending student factions against the classroom fortresses of each side. More than one large building had been drenched with gasoline and set afire. The whole roof of the science building had been burnt off, and both floors of the bathhouse had been gutted. So in America, we have problems with people, individual people, or very small numbers of people doing school shootings. But in the Cultural Revolution at this university, they had problems with people doing actual wars on the campus. You know. So maybe we can give ourselves a little bit of slack. Okay, no. Which is better? Which would you prefer? Oh boy. When we visited the science building, it displayed a handsome new roof made of the light gray tile Beijing kiln operators produced to such perfection, but nothing had been done about the charred east walls and gaping window apertures of the bathhouse, or the firing holes hacked in the sides of the 4-story dormitory buildings, or the pockmarks on these and so many other structures made by bullets, shells, and other assorted hard missiles, such as the nuts and bolts that had been fired from huge slingshots made of bicycle inner tubes attached at both ends to convenient window frames. The steps of the university reception center still sagged rakishly towards a dip in the road that marked the line of an underground tunnel through which one besieged group of students belonging to a faction called the Fours had tried to escape. The remains of trenches and other earthworks could still be seen on the hill across from the first classroom building where Bear, a member of the big name Jinggangshan Regiment, had appeared defiant and shirtless on the day the Beijing workers arrived on the campus to stop the fighting. Bear hurled a hammer, a shovel, and finally a hand grenade at the workers on the road below, but they surrounded the building anyway. Some of the neglect may also be attributed to the fact that the new education, now in the experimental stage, is not campus-oriented, but has its face turned outwards towards the whole city, toward that impressive industrial region that is growing up both in front of and behind the once silent mountains. Students now spend as much time in the factories and on the construction sites of Greater Beijing as they do in classrooms and laboratories, and professors devote as much energy to developing liaison with the scores of factories and enterprises with which the university is allied, as they do to lecturing and advising students. No longer will thousands of privileged young men and women withdraw into the leafy wonderland of Tsinghua to crack boots until they are too old to laugh. No longer will they stuff their heads with mathematical formulas relating to the outmoded industrial practices of pre-war Europe and America, sweat through surprise attack exams, and then emerge after years of isolation from production and political engagement, unable to tell high-carbon steel from ordinary steel, or a proletarian revolutionary from a revisionist. Alright, who can tell high-carbon steel from ordinary steel? And what does he mean by ordinary steel? That's a good fucking question, actually. What does he mean by ordinary steel? It's pretty easy to tell high-carbon steel from stainless steel. One of them rusts and the other one doesn't so much. Oh boy. But high-carbon steel holds an edge better. And hardens harder. But that makes it chip more. So if you're getting a Japanese knife, for example, fancy Japanese chef's knife, they chip more often. Big problem with Japanese chef's knives, but they hold an edge way better because they're harder. Yeah. I actually my latest knife, it's made with what is this steel on this thing? It says somewhere D2 is a Chinese knife. It's D2 steel, which is not quite stainless, actually. So I think it probably holds an edge pretty well. I've only had it for a little while and had to sharpen it only once so far, so like after having it for like 3 months, which is pretty good. So my previous one, what is this? What does it say? It's 6450K steel. Don't know what that is. This is American made, but it's actually shittier. It's not made as well as my newer knife, unfortunately. Costs about the same. They still sell this little tiny thing. Both of my knives are tiny. Anyway, I don't like carrying big knives. Okay, anyway. They still sell this little thing for the same price as the new knife that I got. And this, don't buy this. Don't buy this. Buy the buy the one that I got. It's a Civivi Praxis Mini. Get that. This is a, what is this? CRKT Drifter. Yeah. It's not as good. To be honest. Anyway, I do like the blade shape on this though. It has like a recurve to it, which helps with like slicing ropes and shit, but it makes it a pain to sharpen, so if you're sharpening shit by hand on a stone, having a recurved blade is a huge pain. Anyway. Alright. Let's continue, right? Sorry. So we have a little bit of a thing here. In primary school, dead serious about reading books. In middle school, read dead books seriously. In the university, seriously read books to death. In verses like these, the new student generation derides the educational spirit of pre-cultural revolution times, and their derision carries with it, it would seem, a certain strand of disdain for a physical plant so carefully laid out and so meticulously tended by the American founders of the institution more than half a century ago. The foreigners wanted to isolate their independent academic kingdom from the life around it, the better to cultivate a colonial mentality among the Christian intellectuals they gathered there. The Kuomintang continued this tradition, of course, but its administrators were too corrupt to spend money on repairs. Classic Kuomintang. The communist administrators who later took control of the campus surely never felt at ease with the extravagant American style of its buildings and grounds, its lawns and pools, all built with the Chinese people's money, and so never really maintained them either. No one ever cultivates lawns in North China in any case. Good for them. Whatever the truth may be, obviously the physical renovation of the Tsinghua campus has not stood high on the list of today's priorities. Factories, communes, workers' housing, flood control, pumping stations, coal mines, trolleybuses, water mains, and a new Beijing subway have all taken precedence. Today's university, after all, is not so much a center of learning as a liaison center for learning for the University of Life. There will be time to fix it up when life itself has been transformed more to the taste of the burgeoning working class that now calls Beijing its own. We have a footnote. Longtime residents of Beijing assure me that prior to 1966, the revolutionary administration adequately maintained the Tsinghua campus. If the Tsinghua campus seemed somewhat unkept, it also seemed very quiet, semi-deserted, so as to speak. This was because in 1971 only a first-year class was in attendance, a class of 2,800 workers, peasants, and soldiers, almost half of whom were already out on field assignments. New classes would be added, one each year until the student body again reached and then surpassed its traditional enrollment of 12,000. Can I just stop to talk about something here? They're talking about sending out half the students on field assignments. So, in America, if you mention this, people will say that it's evil and bad and anti-intellectual, but that's a load of bullshit, right? Oh no, real life experience? We can't let students have that. But I mean, in America, that's kind of how it is often in the academic world, right? It is very isolated. Unless you're lucky enough to be able to get an internship. And even then, most internships in this fucking country are just like menial office tasks instead of learning how to do the actual job that you're trying to learn how to do in university. Anyway, in In the meantime, the few students actually going to classes and living in the dorms rattled around like peas in a dry pod. When they came, 100 or so at a time, to swim in the warm masonry-lined lake reclaimed years ago from a neighborhood swamp, their chatter and singing livened that area of reeds and weeds as if a flock of happy birds had suddenly descended, but when they dispersed to study and work, they vanished from sight among the trees. Of course, if one toured the classrooms and workshops, one did come now and then upon a group of a dozen or more young people intently listening to a lecture, operating some complicated machine tools or soldering the leads of newly made transistors. But even in such important production units as the chemistry plant in the northeast corner of the grounds or the truck manufacturing shop at the central oval, very few students or staff could be seen. In 1971, Tsinghua was an institution of upheaval and transition, and the hows and whys of the momentous change were what we had come to inquire into. For this, the relaxed, quiet atmosphere was ideal. The people who wanted to meet, students, faculty, administrators, and workers' propaganda team members, all seemed to have plenty of time. We could talk for 1 day, 3 days, or 6 days if we so desired. We ended up returning for 19 days in a row, and still gained only an introduction to the complex history of the Cultural Revolution at Tsinghua. We arrived by car from the city every morning, promptly at 9, no matter what time we left our lodgings. Our solemn driver Wang always managed to enter the imposing west gate at the same hour, and were met by our hosts for the day in front of whatever building they had chosen for our talks. The first day, this was the big reception center on the main campus oval, where a huge room on the second floor had been equipped with sofas and easy chairs covered with lace-trimmed white cloth and set out in such an extended rectangle that conversations there were more like an international peace conference than an informal exchange of questions and answers. Fortunately, on the second day, we abandoned this grand setting for a little upstairs room in an old dormitory building just north of the Quiet House, now famous as faction leader Kuai Da Fu's headquarters during Tsinghua's 100-Day War of 1968. After a week or so, the talks were moved once again, this time to a creaking single-storied brick mansion that had formerly been the home of Tsinghua presidents and was sometimes called Mei Yiqi's house after the last Kuomintangner to run the school. Mei Yiqi died recently in Taiwan, since the builders of this foreign-style house had not taken proper precautions against dampness from the earth beneath. The floor joists had begun to rot away. The wide wood floors, so unusual in China, sagged precariously and in some places had even broken through. With the window frames also rotting and the bushes outside growing ever higher to block out light, and with the neglected lawn producing a fine crop of weeds, this once grand dwelling, now renamed House A, was slowly turning into something out of Edgar Allan Poe. A fine setting, it seemed, for the nocturnal comings and goings of Liu Shaqi's wife, Wang Guangmei, who had lived here in 1966 under the pseudonym Ho Pu, or Little Ho, so that the students would not easily discover that she, of all people, was in charge of the work team that was running their lives. That is impressive. Liu Shaqi's wife, oh boy. Yeah, that would be kind of wild to find out. Like, I don't know, just like imagine if you found out that the spouse of some big the head honcho of some big federal 3-letter agency here in America was secretly undercover to control things at your university. Hello. Yeah, that's kind of wild. All right. When we adjourned our talks at noon each day, we strolled over to a low, rambling dining hall not far to the north. It was there that Wang Guangmei, her work team under orders to withdraw, had once nervously served potatoes to angry rebel students and been denounced for transparent tricks. This and other tales we heard with fascination while eating, and then either took a fitful nap in the old dormitory next to the Quiet House. Imagine Dr. Fauci was mixing your vaccines. Oh my god. Like the world's worst episode of Undercover Boss. Y'all, Liu Shaoqi's wife is controlling our university. What's happening? Oh my god. Or played several fast games of badminton on a blacktop court behind House A. Many different cadres from Tsinghua's new revolutionary committee, party committee, and Mao Zedong thought workers' propaganda team helped arrange our talks and took turns being in the chair, so to speak. But the man who introduced the history of Tsinghua to us on the first morning later showed up most consistently, made most of the arrangements, and provided most of the ad hoc explanations, which helped clarify things said by others. He was Liu Mingyi, a worker from the Capital Steelworks. No one could mistake him for a campus intellectual. He was too solid and too tough. Oh boy. His arms were at least 4 inches through at the biceps. 4 inches. At least 4 inches. 4 inches through at the biceps. Let's fucking go. I think I got it, y'all. Hell yeah. All right. I mean, you can't just mention that without and his chest filled his cotton jacket to the bursting point. Y'all, I literally just did a photo shoot the other day. in one of my new dress shirts that is a little bit tight in the chest, you know. But I think they mean a different type of different source of chest bursting through the shirt. Mine is, well, you can see why. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't have massive pecs. I just have tits. Great. Alright, there's a little footnote here. Where's footnote number 4? Oh, over here. They're talking about the party committee, okay, or the revolutionary committee and the party committee. So they're going to explain what that means. Revolutionary committees were the new organs of power set up everywhere in China after the overthrow of the old party and state apparatus. They were made up of representatives of mass organizations, revolutionary old cadres, and People's Liberation Army delegates. A party committee is the leading body of the Communist Party at all organizational levels, local, county, provisional, and municipal. Party committees were almost all universally broken up and dissolved in 1966 and 1967 by attacks from below, based... but they were reconstituted in 1968, 69, and 1970 once the revolutionary committees had been set up. Okay. So, we're talking about Liu Mingyi. Okay. His facial expression bespoke his origin as plainly as his build. His open, enthusiastic countenance was completely in tune with his habit of straight thinking and straight talking. All of this, it seemed, could have come from only one place, the shop floor. From the shop floor, too, he had acquired a naive but heartfelt male chauvinism, which got him into a lot of trouble with the students and staff of the university, and with us as well. Yeah. Mao Zedong had said that the working class must take charge of the superstructure and transform it. Anyone disagree with this? I think depending on how you interpret that sentence, many anarchists would probably agree, right? They would probably say working class is too small of a, or too specific of a word, though, in many cases, unless you're an anarcho-syndicalist, in which case you're like, oh yeah, hell yeah, we gotta take over and transform things. We the working class. Alright, steelworker Liu was engaged in exactly this task, and it was a remarkable thing to see, because he seemed to know what he wanted to do and how to go about doing it. His function at our talks was to set the political framework and then lead the discussion on from one problem to another in such a way that the past, the present, and the future all became clear. He showed absolutely no signs of being ill at ease in an unfamiliar situation. On the contrary, he seemed to enjoy every minute of his life and work. Our most interesting informants besides Liu were 5 staff members. Run Yanshen, Zhu Hongliang, Wang Yongxian, Gao Hongjing, and Wu Weiyu. Okay. Probably butchered all of those. They have been students or young assistant instructors when the Cultural Revolution began and had taken an active part in the militant rebel movement from beginning to end. Though they had been on opposite sides during the violent factional struggle of 1968, they sat with us day after day through good-humored explanations and never once quarreled over what had happened, over what the position of the various sides had been, or over where each had been right or wrong. This was a remarkable demonstration of the fine political work done by the workers' propaganda team, because not so long before, these young men had been convinced that those on the opposite side were counter-revolutionary wreckers, and had maintained that questions of class power, such as they then faced, could only be settled by force of arms. Hence they had been trying to kill one another. How they had fallen into such, or how had they fallen into such sharp opposition? That's what the book is supposed to be about, right? That's why we're here. How had they been brought together? How had they reached such unanimity that they could laugh about the earnest nonsense they had believed about each other not so many months before? The answers were a part of the story we had come to unravel. We had, of course, to start at the beginning. In order to get a full picture, we talked not only to the rebel students, but to several professors who were in part responsible for the old Tsinghua carrying on as it did, to higher Communist Party cadres who had backed the professors and then been overthrown, to members of the workers' propaganda team that had arrived in July 1968 and still remains to direct the affairs of the whole university, and to new students only a few months out of the fields and the factories who are pioneers of a new education. Yeah, so he's mentioned this, we've mentioned this a few times already, but like, legit, like, all the workers around the area were so pissed off at these students, like, literally trying to kill each other on campus, that they had to intervene. They had to send people into the campus to intervene, like, hey, what the fuck are you doing? Anyway, that's the workers' propaganda team. Tsinghua occupies the ground right alongside the main campus of Beijing University, where the Cultural Revolution first took form as a mass movement. Several cadres of Beijing University's philosophy department, led by Nie Yuanzi, wrote the big character poster, which, okay, the Duzzy Bows, okay, let's talk about those, hold on. Gotta bring out the Duzzy Bows. It's my favorite. I love the Duzzy Bows, okay. Here's a perfect example. Here you go. Here's a bunch of students writing up some Duzzy Bows. Okay. As you can see, they're big posters that you put on the wall. That's what they are. They have a very long tradition, like thousands of years of tradition in China of doing this, like to complain about things. Like people would literally like complain about the emperor with these giant posters and shit. It was like well established. So they continue doing it in the Cultural Revolution. I love them. Anyway, so this guy, Nie Yuanzi, okay, wrote the big character poster that sparked the rebellion on May 25th, 1966. All this poster demanded, in fact, was that the president of Beijing University, Lu Ping, remove restrictions on debate about the play Hai Ri dismissed from office, which he was treating as an academic controversy over historical fact, rather than a political conflict over the correctness or incorrectness of Mao Zedong's line for socialist construction. This is true. We've talked about this play and the whole thing at Beijing University. Once again, a lot of this stuff is talking about stuff that we already read about a little bit. That was like at least mentioned way back when we read Silent Choppers and Snake Spirits, like last year or 2 years ago, however the fuck long ago that was. It was a long time ago at this point. Once again, great book, go read it. Anyway. The poster unleashed a popular hurricane because it mounted a direct attack on a party person in power and called him a revisionist whose controls and plots should be smashed. Before Nie Yuanzi's power went up, most students had gone along with whatever their university party committee decreed, and the theory that was automatically carrying out Mao's line. After her wide-open and scathing criticism, some of the braver and more militant students began making their own judgments concerning leading cadres, regardless of their rank or status. At Tsinghua, where the early debates of the Cultural Revolution had been smothered even more effectively than at Beida, which she's going to talk about, the abbreviated Chinese way of saying Beijing University, is frequently used because it's more convenient. Beida. Okay, we'll try to remember that. The rebel students had an even bigger target than Lu Ping. This was Jiang Nanxiang, who was not only part of the president of Tsinghua and the president of Tsinghua and head of its party committee, but was concurrently the Minister of Higher Education in the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. As soon as Nie Wenzi's poster appeared, Tsinghua students crowded the Beidao campus next door to study it. When it was broadcast to the nation on June 1st, an indication that it had support from Mao Zedong, a group of Tsinghua students, among them Huai Dafu, launched an open offensive against their own communist leadership with a poster which asked, "Is our party committed to a committee named Ma or Xiu? Marx or revision?" During the next 10 days, the administration lost control over the situation. Rebel students, staff, and teachers, buying paper and paint with their own money, covered the campus with a whole series of posters exposing Jiang Nanxiang and his constitutional line over the year, or educational line over the years. Chapter 2. Surprise attacks on stuffed ducks. What was it about Tsinghua that the rebels repudiated? Primarily the whole idea of expertise in command, the pressure on the students to strive for fame and prosperity as brilliant scientists and engineers, without whose genius China could not advance. As the system had developed through the 1950s and 1960s, the sole measure of merit had become grades. So I think most anarchists probably agree with this. This technocracy ideal is ridiculous, right? And undesirable. Wouldn't work and is also undesirable in the first place, regardless. So, yeah. But maybe some think that's somehow a good idea. I don't know. This is the problem, right? Every time you think you're doing that, you're always going to get somebody you're giving somebody too much power, right? That's what we think, at least as anarchists, right? It's like, it doesn't matter how much of a supposed expert somebody is at something, they can fuck up. And giving them too much power is going to make those fuck ups way worse, right? If their fuck up affects a million people because they got put in a position of great power, that's a problem, right? And also the idea that, like, these super smart, ultra expert people should be in charge and everyone else should have no power is, again, very not anarchist, obviously, and these students also disagreed with it correctly. Technocracy was invented to mock this bullshit. Yeah, exactly. Like, the entire, like, idea of it wasn't even meant to be, like, it was yeah, originally speaking. It was just a thought experiment, really, to point out that it would be ridiculous. But people were like, oh, what if it wasn't ridiculous? This happens so often. Somebody will write a book about that's basically some thought experiment about something that could happen that would be really bad. And a bunch of people read that book and say, wow, that sounds like a really great idea. Like, if you write a book about some, like, theoretical future eugenics program, and a bunch of people were like, wow, that sounds great, it's like, the whole point was that it would be bad. People somehow mistaking dystopian fiction for utopian fiction is wild to me. Like, how does that happen? Oh, boy. Anyway. So, the sole measure of merit had become grades. Yeah, that's a problem. Therefore, our education, it was held, had no class character. Everyone was equal before grades. Education has no class character, right? So I want you to point out I want you to go to a school that has in some city in America, okay, that is not super, like, well funded, but not also ultra underfunded, and then has a wide variety of racial diversity, okay? Like, I'm talking like a young, like high school or middle school or something, okay? Now go through all the students and give them eye exams, and then give them glasses if they need them. Watch how suddenly a whole group of people starts getting better at their classes and getting higher grades now because they have glasses and can actually fucking read now. And they couldn't before because they couldn't afford glasses. Oh, but sure, education has no class character. The grades have nothing to do with anything else. It couldn't possibly be related to class in any way. And I'm not... That's an actual example, just to be clear. I'm not... Let me see if I can find the... an actual example. There was specifically like relatively recent thing about this actually with the glasses. Why am I... What does this say? What the fuck is this shit? Should children be paid for good grades? Oh my god, shut the fuck up. That's not what I'm looking for. Hold on. I'm having a lot of trouble finding this article. I thought I might have saved it, but I didn't. Okay, well, anyway. Yeah, it turns out that people who are routinely disadvantaged and can't afford glasses do worse in school. And in America, that manifests along racial lines very obviously. Anyway, who could have fucking guessed? Oh, yeah, everyone's been saying this for forever, but, you know, people just get ignored. Nah. No way. Everyone's equal before grades, what are you talking about? Anyway, therefore striving for high grades became the main concern of everyone in the university, and the period of study, including preparatory school, had been extended to absurd lengths, from 4 to 6 years, then from 6 to 9 years, and finally from 9 to 11 years in order for the students to have time to master all the knowledge in the foreign books that dealt with their special field. In the drive for book knowledge, both faculty and students eschewed practice, and the longer they sat in the libraries and classrooms, the less contact they had with the outside world, including current practice in their branch of knowledge. Yep. An accepted slogan was, once you master physics and chemistry, you can walk under heaven, i.e. win privilege in life. Hence, grades are life and death, and good grades ensure a good life. Ah, boy. I need to check something, y'all. We were talking about bicep size earlier. You mentioned the size of this dude's biceps, and I measured it the way that they were saying, and mine was probably around the same size, actually, which is impressive. Then again, I work out like 5 times a week, so that's... Okay. We're gonna do circumference, though, if I can manage it. I'm not sure how this is gonna work, but I'll try. I'll do the left one, so that it's not the bigger one. I assume the right one is the bigger one because I'm right-handed, but let's see if I can get this around nicely. Okay, and we'll figure out tightly. Okay, maybe. Okay, it looks like I'm around 13 inches, which is not particularly impressive, actually. That's about average for... It's a little tiny bit above average for women of my age. So never mind. Damn. Damn. Yeah, I didn't think so, though. I have no testosterone, y'all. What do you expect? Do you think I can build muscle easily? I can't. It doesn't work like that. The fact that I have significantly less testosterone than the average woman my age is certainly... but still have slightly bigger biceps than the average is impressive to me, though, I will say. By significantly less, I mean like functionally zero. Like the tests aren't accurate enough to tell whether I have 0 or slightly above 0. 0 is within the range of error. Whereas like the average cis woman would have like whatever the unit is, like anywhere from like 30 to 90 on average, but it could be higher depending on different factors. And dudes have like 200 something on average to way higher, 300, 400 something. It really depends. Anyway, as far as the averages go. But yeah, when you're taking spironolactone, you know, you have like basically none. So yeah, that muscle atrophy hits you really hard. Anyway, sorry for the distraction. So anyway, all of this was absolutely contrary to Mao Zedong's theory of education. Mao considered the goal of study not to be grades or a prosperous life for the experts or even the cultivation of red engineers, but to enable everyone who receives an education to become a toiler with socialist consciousness and culture. The period of study, said Mao, should be shortened, not lengthened, and students, far from being locked year after year in their classrooms, should take a regular part in production and in class struggle. Mao's model was Resistance University, set up in Yan'an in 1936 to train cadres for carrying on the anti-Japanese war in all fields. It was led by Lin Biao. Here, in informal classes, students students and teachers alike put the development of revolutionary consciousness as their primary goal, took as long as necessary to argue things out, and worked regularly to grow food and build housing for themselves and to supply material to support the front. So there's a footnote here on this quotation: everyone who receives an education to become a toiler with socialist consciousness and culture. Footnote on this translation: toiler is used here as the translation of lao dongjie, anyway, one who labors, okay, as distinct from worker, gongran, okay? Toiler includes not only manual workers, but mental workers such as technicians, teachers, professional people, etc. So, anyway. It's distinct from just manual labor. It's all sorts of labor. Anyway. That's why they use that here. Anyway. It's not so. In English, we have the connotation of the word toil or toiler or toiling is very not toileting. Toiling is very kind of, it's a very negative connotation, I think, usually. We often think of toil as like unnecessary work or something, or like unnecessarily difficult or drawn out work or whatever, but in this case they're not meaning it like that. They're just using it as a distinction to worker, because they want to include more people in this case. Because Mao had its distinction between the two. Anyway. Okay. The whole Tsinghua tradition was a far cry from that of wartime Yan'an. The university had been founded in 1911 by Americans using Boxer indemnity money. By investing in higher education in China, they hoped to develop an intellectual elite in tune with American aspirations and interests, an elite that would, according to Han Suyin, continue of its own volition the process of turning China into a client state. This type of operation, the president of the University of Illinois wrote to Teddy Roosevelt in 1910, is more useful than an army. Right, they wanted to indoctrinate a certain class of people who would be on average in positions of more power than other people, and they wanted to make sure that those people would have certain ideas, about how things should be run. American ideas about how things should be run in China, which would of course be the ideas that are most conducive to making Americans rich off of Chinese people's labor. Am I reading too much into it? No, I think I'm about right there. Indeed it was. For 38 years, first under American and then under Kuomintang control, Tsinghua turned out a small stream of highly trained technicians, many of whom were ready to serve the Kuomintang clique and its imperial masters in whatever capacity proved most lucrative. See? I told you. Contrary to expectations, Tsinghua also graduated some dedicated revolutionaries, but this was a countercurrent, stimulated by the national liberation struggle in China, or that the university administration tried hard to block and wipe out. Many Tsinghua graduates went on to study abroad, particularly in the United States. Study abroad? I hardly know where it was. This, after all, was one of the reasons the school had been established in the first place. When they returned to China, a crucial number of these people were reassigned as faculty and staff at their old alma mater. Thus there grew up over the years a core of people in power at Tsinghua who were linked by the common bonds of elite origin, a college study together, graduate experience abroad, and teaching at their home school. Outsiders really had no right to speak. Hi, Nix. You're up early. I hope you're okay. Probably not sleeping well, I assume. I'm sorry. No matter what happened, a tight little clique of academic authorities ruled the roost and perpetuated the system of which they considered themselves to be the finest products. Anxiety, yeah. I'm sorry, hon. Oh my gosh. After Beijing was liberated in 1949, Tsinghua was hard to transform. It was not that the Communist Party made little effort to do so. On the contrary, right after liberation, a huge movement to repudiate worship America thought and wipe out colonial mentality swept the campus. Students and faculty alike went out to the countryside as part of land reform teams, and many young men and women joined the Chinese volunteers fighting in Korea. Political study was put on the agenda, and manual labor became a regular part of the daily life of most students and staff. At the same time, the university was shaken by rapid expansion. In the 38 years, from 1911 to 1948, only 2,700 students graduated, while in the 17 years from 1948 to 1966, 27,000 students graduated, a 20-fold annual increase. The successive political movements and the expansion certainly diluted the control exercised by the old graduates who had dominated the campus for so long. Nevertheless, Tsinghua was never fully transformed into a socialist institution carrying out Mao Zedong's educational line. This was in part because the communists directly involved, such as Jiang Nanxiang, Minister of Higher Education, and Liu Dingyi, head of the propaganda department of the Chinese Communist Party and the man responsible for educational policy, were skeptical about the socialist transformation that Mao advocated. Resistance University and its informal development of consciousness was all right for the guerrilla atmosphere of wartime Yan'an, they reasoned, but now the Communist Party was was out to transform China into a modern country, and education had to be regular. Regular, of course, meant Western traditional set courses, earned credit, grades in command, formal examinations, all propelling the students toward brilliant careers after graduation. And who could ensure that this regular education developed properly? Who else but those Western-trained academic authorities and the younger generation of assistants and associates that had personally developed in their own image? The turn to the Soviet Union for inspiration, a dominant trend in China in the 50s, unfortunately, only reinforced this. In the Soviet Union, higher education was as regular as anyone could desire, since Soviet educators had studied well the university systems of Western Europe and America. In fact, they had gone further in cutting the links between theory and practice that then was general even in the West, and when their system was transplanted to China, it helped create an academic atmosphere that was more a caricature than a copy of bourgeois education. Professor Tong Shibai of the Automation Department, a second-generation Tsinghua graduate, his father had gone from Tsinghua to the University of Pennsylvania to study architecture, recalled for us some of the highlights of his academic career. Better to have a profession than 10,000 mu of land was the motto my grandfather adopted. As a Qing dynasty official and then a school principal, he sent his 3 sons abroad to study. All my father's friends were Tsinghua graduates who went on to study in America. With such a background, I had to be somebody special. During the war, while other students found their way to Yan'an or joined the National Army to fight Japan, I prepared to be a bourgeois gentleman at Hongkou Christian College, where I was taught to turn the other cheek. At least I refused to work for the Japanese when I graduated and took a minor job with the Yellow River Conservation Project in Xi'an. But the administration was corrupt and the pay so low I couldn't buy enough to eat, so I went to Kunming, to Southwest Union University, the wartime combination of Tsinghua, Beijing, and Nankai universities, and studied radio engineering. After the war, I came to Tsinghua as a teaching assistant, but avoided politics by immersing myself in music. Ah, boy. All day long, I practiced my violin in the music hall. Let's see here. I thought the violin sounded better than the political slogans of the embattled student movement. Finally, my father arranged for me to go to the University of Illinois. From 1948 until June 1955, I studied and taught in the United States. I did consider going to U of I. I did, because I, grew up in Illinois. I ended up going to a different Illinois school. NIU. But yeah. The main U of I campus, oh my god. I went there and it was like an incredibly hot day. It was like 90 fucking degrees or some shit. It was so awful when I got my tour there. Oh my god, it was horrible. That may or may not have subconsciously affected my decision to not go there. The fact that the tuition would have been more expensive than the school I did go to certainly played a bigger part, though. From 1948 until June 1955, I studied and taught in the United States. I was prepared to return home in 1951, but the Department of Justice forbade us to leave. It was 3 years later that I finally defied the U.S. government and left anyway. Once home, I chose to return to Tsinghua. That was natural considering my grandfather, my father, and my own past. At first, I was worried that my knowledge might not be useful to the new society, but when I looked at what they were teaching, my fears were laid to rest. At that time, they were using Russian teaching material. It was no different from my own. I could still walk under heaven. Liu Shaoqi advocated learning everything from the Soviet Union. Of course he did. So, at the start, there was no attack on my methods, no struggle against me. Whatever I had learned from my teachers, I taught. So-and-so discovered this, what his name discovered that. Classic, yeah. They still do this bullshit. So study hard, my students, and become inventors. When I described a process, I used a lot of formulas to show how smart I was. When students came to me for advice, I said, better pack the knowledge into your head. As my grandfather used to say, a profession is worth 10,000 acres of land, so study. Learn the material by heart. Wherever you go, you'll be all right. In teaching work, I favored the smart students. I pulled a long face at the slower ones. My first ideological education came with the anti-rightist movement of 1957. It was a major blow to me. Politically, people forgave me. After all, I was raw out of America. But toward my working style and my teaching methods, they were very critical. Correctly critical, I might add, myself. They said I taught in an authoritarian way and always had the last word on everything. The last word, of course, was the way people did things abroad. If the Americans had a color code for electrical resistors, red, yellow, blue, China had to have the same. The color code for resistors is an international standard, just to be clear. I just want to point out that I don't think having a standardized color code for resistors, as someone with an electrical engineering degree, I don't think that this is authoritarian. I think he has a bit of a... He's saying that, oh, we should use the same standards as the Americans for the resistor codes, color codes. All right, class. Okay, hold on just a moment. So, while I do think, here's the thing about resistor color codes. They could just print the amount of the resistor on the resistor, and sometimes they do now, actually. You will find resistors that just have the number printed on them now, but this is how most resistors tend to be, okay? I have plenty lying around over somewhere. I could go get them if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. So this is the 5-band color code, okay? So you have 4 here that tell you the number, and you have 1 that's separated from them that tells you the tolerance of the resistor, okay, in percentages. So anyway, this is the code, and it goes from black to white, and then there's gold and silver as well for the tolerances for low tolerance, or rather, I don't know, I guess high. Worse tolerances. Gold and silver are the worst tolerances. These ones are plus or minus percent, so they're plus or minus 1% is the red, so those are like the best tolerances. Anyway, so yeah, you see this. So this one we have brown, black, red, and green, and then we have yellow / gold. It's actually gold, not yellow, just to be clear. The fact that we have gold and yellow is very annoying. What's really annoying is that the yellow to me looks more like gold, and the gold to me looks more like yellow. Why don't they switch them around? I don't know. The gradient is a bit weird. Regardless, the yellow here is not what we have here. This is actually gold, so we have 5%, plus or minus 5% tolerance. Okay, and then here we have brown, so we have a 1, and then we have black, so 0, and then the third digit is red, so 2, so it's 102 times our multiplier of 100,000. So 102 times 100,000. Okay. Ohms. There's your number. So that would be, as you might guess, over. Wow, that's a lot of ohms. I mean, that's okay. You can have high ohm resistors. Anyway. Or is it actually... I can't... Wait. Never mind. I'm not smart. It's 1.02. Sorry. Yeah. They don't actually explain it on this. Do they? They really don't explain that on there. Hold on. Let me make sure I'm getting it right. Just to be clear, I haven't used resistor color codes in a long time. Nobody cares about them. They are silly. I do think that they're silly, and they don't work if you're colorblind either. It's it's a bit of a pain. Oh boy. So let's see here. It was 102 times green, 10 to the 5th. Oh, so it is actually much smaller. So no, I was right the first time. Why did I second guess myself? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's 10.2 mega ohms plus or minus 5% tolerance. Anyway, that's what the example was. I was right the first time. Why did I second guess myself? I don't know, y'all. You'd think I would remember it correctly. I mean, I did, but then I thought I was wrong for some reason. I have to second guess myself on everything. Okay. Anyway. I do actually kind of agree though that yeah, I totally agree. Color codes for resistors are silly, and we should replace them with just writing the goddamn number on the thing, which many manufacturers do now. Oh boy. Most people, like, I have a box where I sort out all of my components, you know, and I have an individual little section of the box that has, or a different baggie that's labeled with the number, so you don't have to remember what the color code is. Let me just show you. Okay, so I have this box here. So these are all 1/4 watt resistors in here, and then I also have a box for capacitors. Okay. So they can handle up to 1/4 of a watt of power. So I have that labeled there. And so like here's the top box here has 39,000 to 10 million ohms. And as you can see, it's gotten a little bit messed up, and I'm going to have to resort all of these. But I put little stickers in the bottom of each thing. Maybe you can kind of see that. And then each segment has different sizes. But yeah, this has gotten a little jumbled up, and I'm going to have to fix that anyway. Should have just kept them in bags, honestly. So they don't get, but yeah. That's how I do it, so I don't have to remember the color codes, but now I do have to remember the color codes because they got all mixed up. The dividers between the sections were like not fully up to the making full contact with the top of the box. So if you shake the box up, they get mixed up a little bit. The resistors in there. It's a mess. The box has been moved around many thousands of miles in multiple directions, you know, over the years, so it's gotten jumbled. Anyway, let's continue. I also have somewhere I have a big collection of components that's just in bags. Don't know why I didn't just keep them in the bags. Anyway, no, it's nice to have the sorted, divided container. But anyway. Sorry for the extended distraction about resistor color codes. I'm sorry. I decided that it wouldn't do to go on like that. I couldn't just advocate American techniques. When a problem came up, I would first check to see if the Soviets had a solution, and if it was the same, then I would talk of that. In 1962, Liu Shaoqi came to Tsinghua and called us professors the stable elements, the 108 generals of Tsinghua. There is the 108 generals were the heroes of the classical novel Water Margin. Okay, anyway. He asked us to write the textbooks that would be used all over the country. I became the editor-in-chief of the electronics material, and right up until the Cultural Revolution, the teaching material I edited had a great influence all over the country. I saw nothing wrong with it, nothing wrong at all. I thought that natural science has no class character. Oh boy. Naturalism is, oh my god, what a mess. Capitalists use electronics, socialists use electronics. Wait, you say posting from your iPhone? Oh boy. So I just dusted off my old material and spread out my wares. But in fact, I never considered whether what I wrote was useful for the education of workers, peasants, and soldiers. I wrote not to serve the people, but to display my talents and demonstrate my learning. I used all those formulas and those foreign quotes to inspire admiration, to show how able I was. Simple problems that could be explained with a few well-chosen sentences I made complex. An able worker who had made a number of inventions lost confidence in himself after he heard me explain Ohm's law. V equals I times Z. How is that hard to explain? Oh, because it's a simple thing, right? He made it too complex. Y'all, the voltage is equal to the current multiplied by the impedance. Okay? You got that? There you go. Apparently he made it way more complicated than that somehow. How did he make Ohm's law complicated? It's literally the most simple thing of all time. Okay, y'all. So if we're talking direct current here, and you've got let's say you've got a light bulb, okay, and the light bulb runs on 5 volts of power, okay, and you put your ammeter up to in line with the circuit, okay, and you measure the amps going through it, and you find that it's using 1 amp, then you know that the light bulb is using 5 watts, and it also has a resistance, an impedance of something that ends up amounting to, we're going to use simple impedance, okay, we're using just resistance here and not the complex components of the impedance. Okay, that would, there are ways to make Ohm's law more complicated, like including you know, reactance in your impedance, which would be a complex number rather than because that refers to, that's how it, we're talking about direct current here. We don't need to care about reactance. Let's just, we don't need to care about how it reacts to changes in the current, okay? We're just, or the voltage. We're just gonna, direct current, 5 volts flat out. You get 1 amp measuring it, so you know that it's 5 watts being used, and of course, remember, the voltage was 5, and the thing is 1. The amps is 1, you know, the current is 1. So you know that the resistance is also 1 ohm, because the voltage is 5. No, it's kidding. The voltage is, the resistance is 5 ohms. Impedance witchcraft. Okay, do I need to, I don't think you need to pull out a textbook to learn how to multiply 1 and 5 together to make 5. Just a thought. Also, engineers, please, for the love of God, use a calculator. Let me explain. I know you've been taught through your whole life, for some reason, that you need to always do math in your head, and using a calculator is cheating. If you're doing engineering work and you don't use a calculator and you don't double check your work on the computer and everything and have somebody else redo your calculations to make sure it was all correct, people die. Don't do it all in your head. Don't do it all on paper. You refuse to use a calculator, you're going to kill people that way if you become an engineer. Put all of your shit into MATLAB and run it to make sure that it's actually correct, okay? And let somebody check your shit, okay? I'm just saying. And don't just leave shit out. Don't just assume an ideal situation with regard to the forces involved. Looking at you, Tacoma Narrows Bridge. The classic solution, the classic situation, or classic example. You have a terminal that does any calculations I need. Okay, I have a TI Inspire lying around, the original one, not like the fancy new ones with like color screens and touch screens or whatever the fuck. The original TI Inspire, the ones that you can swap the keyboard out to make it a TA84 or whatever the fuck it is. Oh boy, love that. Love that calculator. The thing does calculus for you. Oh boy. Alright, let's see here. Graphing calculators are great. Anyway. But yeah, you can just use computer. So anyway, he somehow managed to make Ohm's law, the explanation of Ohm's law, way too complicated. And this guy, who'd invented several things himself, felt that he could never understand electricity. After my book came out, many students were intrigued by my theoretical approach and wanted to do advanced work under me. One wrote, "After reading your book, I am determined to put all the knowledge of electricity into one formula." Oh dear Lord. So, this has already been tried. Okay. Oh boy. Here we go. Obviously my influence on the young people was leading them to elevate theory to the skies and make it mysterious. My book took up electrical problems in the order that this science developed in capitalist countries. The first volume dealt with rectification, the conversion of alternating to direct current. The first volume of your book about electrical problems is rectifiers. Y'all, I think we need to start a little bit more simply than that. But yeah, it starts off with something that's actually not that simple. Oh no. Alright, y'all. Do I need to explain a full bridge rectifier to the class? I would have to explain so many things. Y'all, you gotta teach the basics first. Anyway, the second dealt with amplification and oscillation, which related to the development of the telephone and radio, and the third dealt with radar, the vacuum tube, semiconductors, and so on. What a big list of things! Oh my gosh. It's very interesting, very general. I wrote this way and taught this way right up until 1966. The vacuum tube was the apex of the whole edifice long after its importance had waned, and after even housewives' co-ops were making transistors in the back streets of Beijing. Hey, I have a question. Anyone want to start a co-op of feral housewives to build transistors? Underground transistor factory. We're building black market transistors, y'all. There were two reasons for this. I thought I had to begin from the beginning and go through all the steps. Result: I never got around to teaching about transistors. I see the problem. I see what he's saying. Furthermore, I was a little shaky on the newest developments, and if I didn't know about them, others were not to plunge ahead of me. You don't constantly read all of the IEEE correspondence? What's your problem, Max? You're not up on literally every single thing in the entire field? Look at it realistically. My textbook had been a hindrance to the development of electronics in this country. I was out of touch with the state of the art, with the actual practice going on around me. I immersed my students in things I had mastered 20 years before in the United States. Had this Professor Tong been a bourgeois academic authority? He personally was convinced he had. And at Tsinghua, he had a lot of company. We talked to his cousin Tong Lingshu, who had come back from the Soviet Union with a degree in architecture, with Qian Weisheng, professor of mechanics, whose career paralleled Norman Bethune's in reverse. While the Canadian doctor came to China to confront the Japanese on the Taihang battlefront, Qian went to the University of Toronto, Bethune's old school, to carve out a brilliant career in mechanical theory that led him to a post in rocket propulsion at Berkeley, California. With Shi Guoheng, a sociologist who had studied, it's actually not she, it's Shi Guoheng, a sociologist who had studied at Harvard, and with several others either trained abroad or trained at home or by returned students. All had essentially the same story to tell. They had been careerists who taught careerism, overseas students who had worshipped foreign technique, theorists divorced from practice, and particularly from the rapidly developing and expanding practice of production and science in China. Insofar as they had led education, they had led it down a well-trodden bourgeois path, and only really confronted the political implications of this when the Cultural Revolution forced them to. How much longer is this section? This is a long section. Okay. Where were we? Yeah, okay, up here. The Kremlin. Okay, yeah. Okay, so they're going to talk about another guy now who's apparently the most interesting to them. So far, considering the complaints that I saw in some of the reviews of this book before we started, I am pleasantly surprised, I guess, or not really surprised. I don't know. I'm. This is pretty good so far. I like how this is done. I don't think it's too detailed. I think all the issues they're talking about and all the quotations they're putting in are very easy to think about and discuss and bring up important issues and stuff. So yeah, I don't think it's like too detailed at all, or like too in depth about these things so far. Maybe later when it's starting to talk about all the fighting with the factions, maybe it changes a little bit, but so far this is a great first impression to the book, so I'm happy we chose this so far. We'll see how it goes. We got through almost a tenth of the book, which is pretty good. So yeah,